In the early 1900s, there was a ruthless and unforgiving female serial killer who murdered multiple men. And in the heat of her rampage, she even killed her own children. The worst part, she allegedly faked her own death and got away with all of her heinous crimes. This is Belle Gunness, America's most notorious female serial killer. Welcome back to our channel, where we delve into the darkest corners of history. In today's episode, we explore the chilling story of Belle Gunness, a woman who went from humble beginnings to become America's most notorious female serial killer. Before we begin, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell to stay up to date with our future videos on true crime. Now, let's dive into the twisted life of Belle Gunness. Belle Gunness was born and named Brynhild Paulsdatter Storseth in Selbu, Sør-Trøndelag, Norway, on November 11, 1859, to Paul and Berit Storseth. She was the youngest of 8 children. Being only 14 years old, she began working for neighboring farms by milking and herding cattle to save enough money to move to the promising land of the United States. When she turned 22, she moved to the USA in search of a better life, and when she was processed by immigration, she changed her name to Belle Gunness, the famous name that later on horrified her victims and their families. She moved to Chicago with her sister and brother-in-law to become a domestic servant and later married her first husband, Mads Sorensen, in 1884, with whom she had 4 children. Confusing family deaths. The couple owned a candy store which later mysteriously burned to the ground. Their home had also burned down, and both instances granted the couple insurance payouts. She had a baby who died in 1887 named Axel, allegedly from acute colitis. Her second baby died from inflammation of the large intestine, which scientifically speaking can result from poisoning. These are among the horrible and suspicious things that happened during their marriage. What's weird is that Gunness had insured both of the children before their deaths and collected a large insurance check after each death. Neighbors gossiped about the babies, since Gunness never appeared to be pregnant. Things got weirder when her husband also died 13 years later. Her husband Mads passed away in an unclear situation. According to official records, Mads Sorensen died on July 30th, 1900 from what was believed to be gastritis or inflammation of the stomach. Before her husband and 2 children's death, Belle took out life insurance policies on them, and as a result, she got more than $5,000 from these deaths, more than $100,000 in today's money. Her second family. After collecting a large life insurance from these deaths, she moved to La Porte, Indiana, and bought a pig farm. Belle married Peter Gunness on April 1, 1902. The following week, while Peter was out of the house, his infant daughter died of unknown causes in Belle's care. Peter died 8 months later due to a skull injury. Belle explained that Peter reached for something on a high shelf and a meat grinder fell on him, smashing his skull. The district coroner convened a coroner's jury, suspecting murder, but nothing came of the case. Belle collected $3,000 insurance money for Peter's death. Things get even more bizarre and more suspicious from here on out. The rampage. She began placing ads in Chicago newspapers in 1905, advertising for potential suitors with whom she could share her newfound wealth. One of her ads was answered by a Wisconsin farmhand, Henry Gerholt. After traveling to La Porte, Gerholt wrote to his family, saying that he liked the farm, was in good health, and requested that they send him seed potatoes. When they failed to hear from him after that, the family contacted Gunness. She told them Gerholt had gone off with horse traders to Chicago. She kept his trunk and fur overcoat. Little did they know, Henry was never going home. Another instance involved John Moe from Minnesota, who answered Gunness's ad in 1906. After they had corresponded for several months, Moe traveled to La Porte and withdrew a large amount of cash. Although no one ever saw Moe again, a carpenter who did occasional work for Gunness observed that Moe's trunk remained in her house, along with more than a dozen others. Over the next decade, Gunness preyed upon vulnerable men who sought companionship and financial security. Unfortunately, these suitors were unaware of the sinister fate that awaited them, as Belle, who later on was named Lady Bluebard, took their lives without hesitation. Her primary motive for murder was probably financial gain, as she sought to acquire her victims' assets, including money, property, and life insurance policies. She saw that she could use these vulnerable men to gain money. That's why many people believe that she was the reason behind her first husband and her 2-year-old baby's death, as she collected a large sum of money from their life insurance, and that her second husband and his infant daughter were slaughtered by her. How did she kill? Once the victims get comfortable in her house and start feeling welcomed, Belle would often mix the poison in food or drinks, disguising it to appear harmless. This method allowed her to kill her victims slowly and make their deaths appear natural or accidental. She was known to administer poison, typically strychnine or arsenic, to her victims. In addition to poisoning, Gunness was not afraid to resort to direct violence. Some victims reportedly died from blows to the head with a blunt object, such as a hammer or an axe. This method ensured a more immediate and brutal demise. There's evidence to suggest that she also suffocated some of her victims. It's believed that she may have used various methods to cause asphyxiation, such as smothering or strangulation. The exact number of Gunness's victims remains unknown, but it's believed that she lured at least 14 men to a rural property in Porte, Indiana. Her victims included individuals like Peter Gunness, her second husband, Ole Budsberg, Olaf Lindblom, John Moe, and more. These men were predominantly middle-aged, recent immigrants, or widowers with valuable assets. They were drawn to Gunness's promises of love, marriage, and financial stability. Once these men arrived at Gunness's farm, they were never seen again. The circumstances surrounding their disappearances were shrouded in mystery, as Gunness was a master of manipulation and deception. She would lure them into her trap, promising a life of happiness, only to brutally murder them for their assets. Some victims were poisoned, while others suffered more violent deaths, their bodies disposed of in shallow graves on her property. But how did Gunness eventually get caught? Revelation of her crimes. In April 1908, her farmhouse in Porte caught a massive fire. In the ruins, authorities found the bodies of a headless adult woman, initially identified as Belle Gunness, and her 3 children. Further investigation unearthed the partial remains of at least 11 additional people on the Gunness property. Newspapers praised the woman and her desperate attempt to save her children from the fire. However, if you think the body belonged to Lady Bluebeard, you might have to think again. There was a key figure in the Belle Gunness case we have yet to talk about: Ray Lampher. He was a former handyman and farmhand who worked for her, and he was secretly in love with her. In November 1908, Lampher was convicted of arson in connection with the fire at Gunness's house. With no escape from the situation, Lampher later confessed that Gunness had placed advertisements seeking male companionship, only to murder and rob the men who responded and subsequently visited her on the farm. He stated that Gunness asked him to burn down the farmhouse with her children inside, and he also asserted that the body thought to be Gunness's was in fact a murder victim, chosen and planted to mislead investigators. Apparently, the brother of one victim had warned Gunness that he might arrive at the farm shortly to investigate his brother's disappearance. Seeing that his belongings are all over Belle's farm, she might have thought of an escape plan. According to Lampher, this impending visit motivated Gunness to destroy her house, fake her own death, and flee. This confession made sense to the investigators, who were trying to find an answer to this mystery. After all, this story vanished away some of the foggy, confusing instances of disappearances of the men who answered her newspaper ads. Nevertheless, Lampher was charged with arson and murder in connection with the fire and the deaths at the farmhouse. During his trial, he maintained his innocence and claimed that he had no involvement in the crimes. Ultimately, Lampher was acquitted of the murder charges but was found guilty of arson and sentenced to imprisonment. While Lampher's conviction added another layer to the Belle Gunness case, it did not provide definitive answers. No final verdict. As investigators dug up the grounds of Gunness's property, they made a horrifying discovery. Beneath the soil, they found numerous shallow graves, each containing the remains of her victims. It became evident that Gunness had not only murdered her suitors, but had also killed her own children. The extent of her crimes shocked the nation and solidified her place in history as one of the most infamous serial killers. While there have been alleged sightings of Belle Gunness throughout the years, there's no concrete evidence to confirm her survival. It's widely believed that she perished in her own attempt to deceive authorities and escape the consequences of her heinous acts. And that concludes our dive into the chilling tale of Belle Sorensen Gunness, the woman who transitioned from a seemingly ordinary life to become America's most notorious female serial killer. The horrors she inflicted upon her victims and the mystery surrounding her ultimate fate continue to captivate true crime enthusiasts to this day. If you found this video intriguing, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and share it with others who share a fascination for true crime stories. Make sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell to be notified whenever we release new videos. We appreciate your support in bringing these dark tales to light. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe.